Hello everyone, welcome back to the Aspergian Journal. In this video, I want to talk about how does anxiety and mental health relate to autism. On the face of it, you might think that anxiety and autism are two separate things, even though they do affect people psychologically and how they exhibit themselves in their behaviours. However, if you speak to people amongst the autism community, you will quickly identify that autistic people are more prone to having a mental health condition of any kind alongside their autism. Over many years, there's been various studies been done into mental health amongst the autism community. In the UK, 70 to 80% of autistic children and adults have experienced mental health issues at some point in their lives, and 5 in every 100 people who use mental health services are identified as autistic. However, statistics and studies might be beneficial when it comes to highlighting the societal issues within healthcare services and identifying solutions to problems that arise. It does not provide any comfort or logical steps to that one can take when it comes to combating their mental health and hopefully see the light at the end of the tunnel in terms of their physical and psychological well-being. Mental health is a spectrum of various conditions ranging from anxiety, stress, depression, eating disorders, bipolar, paranoia, post-traumatic stress disorder, psychosis, schizophrenia, dissociation, and various others. Despite the various types of conditions that come under mental health, they are all very relatable, and autistic people are no different to having a mental health condition alongside their autism trait. And you'll have noticed that I referred to autism trait in rather than condition, because I don't like to use the word condition when it comes to autism, because like myself, I don't see my autism as a condition that has to be cured or has to be, treated, because it's just part of who I am as an individual. And a lot of autistic people will share the same sentiments as I do. And it's not something that we want to take away, because it's part of our uniqueness as individuals. And we should be embracing our indifferences rather than being stereotyped in a way that it's something that has to be addressed, when that is not the case. Mental health conditions can vary in terms of their, severity of the symptoms that the person has, the process of how you overcome them or manage them in a way where it doesn't affect someone's day-to-day life, and is medical intervention necessary in order to help manage someone's mental health condition. A lot of these can be heavily influenced by things that are outside a person's control, like maybe working with people in the workplace that's maybe causing them stress, even that there's not much that you can do about it. As the individual, the only thing that you can do, and that is focus on how you respond to that situation. And is there a way that I can change how I respond to that situation, so it does not impact me as much, and I can just brush it off without a second thought. But also, there is internal factors that can influence someone's mental state depending on their personal circumstances. Like if there's like any abuse and that going on in their home, or if they're brought up in a family where abuse and that has taken place, and that's had a severe impact on them, especially if it's from like early adulthood. For complex conditions like bipolar and schizophrenia, medical intervention is maybe essential, and that to help the person who suffers from these conditions to be able to monitor and stabilise their symptoms, and that so at least then they can cope with day-to-day life. But regardless of whichever condition these people have, it's important that we still value them as individuals, and that we take their health and well-being seriously so they can live fulfilling lives, and to prevent their conditions hindering them in their efforts, to achieve their individual goals and dreams. Always remember, mental health does not discriminate. Anyone can get mental health, and how it impacts a person is just as unique as the individual. And that's why when someone goes to someone and they're concerned about their mental health, it's important that you listen and take on board what they say, and try and be as supportive as much as you can. Because even though whatever they might be thinking or anxious about, to you, it might just be something really silly, and you could laugh about it on your own. But to them, it's causing them that much distress that they need help. At that point, it does not become a laughing matter. So I think it's important to show compassion towards those that do have, regardless of the severity of mental health they have, but to show support, compassion, and give them the guidance that they need to be able to overcome their own individual anxieties, and that so they can live fulfilling lives. Conditions like anxiety and stress are a little bit more treatable, but they can still be equally frightening to the sufferers of anxiety. And depending on the severity of each individual case, medical intervention like taking antidepressants might be necessary to help combat the symptoms in the short term, to regulate them in a way so it doesn't impact the person in question as much harm as it does. But it's not really something that you can rely on in the long term, because other treatments might be like therapy and mindfulness might be more suitable to treat it in the long term. Anxiety is like a spectrum within itself, within mental health. And they're all very relatable in terms of how it can impact a person, and how do you address them moving forward. And these conditions can vary from like obsessive compulsive disorder, OCD, phobias, agoraphobia, panic disorder, generalised anxiety disorder, social anxiety, and many others. Regardless of which anxiety one has, they all manifest on what the individual fears and worries about the most. and develops a range of behaviours or compulsions to be able to cope with their fears, which might help them in the short term, but actually it just causes them to be caught up in a never-ending vicious cycle of despair and uncertainty, which can lead to devastating consequences if left untreated. From what I've experienced, and when I've had to seek help with my anxiety, is that doctors and healthcare professionals are very quick to prescribe antidepressants to people who have anxiety or stress issues, and just basically leave them to it, get on with it, without considering other forms of treatments, and that really sometimes due to the lack of judgment or services that are available. Naturally, everyone suffers with anxiety every now and then, especially if there is an actual external threat or if they're in a very stressful situation which causes them to be on alert. When there is an external threat, and this initiates the fight or flight response, which is an internal mechanism that we all have that keeps us safe. However, in the absence of an external threat, or not being in a very highly stressful situation, our fight or flight response can go into overdrive and really make us feel overwhelmed on the things that we fear and worry about the most, and then that causes our bodies to be overwhelmed, and that with various physical symptoms and reactions like heart palpitations, dizziness, upset stomachs, feeling nauseous, and sweating or shivering, and this can vary from one person to another. Even though it might feel scary to face anxiety head on, but if you overcome it by developing healthy and sustainable strategies, is far better than being stuck in this vicious cycle of taking antidepressants or any other or other things, and to just numb the pain or the problem in the short term. Obviously, if you do struggle with your anxiety and you feel like you need help, and to identify and address the root cause of your mental health, then by all means, speaking to a counsellor or a mental health professional can help you, and in that quest to identify what causes your anxiety and stress, and work out strategies on what you can do to eventually overcome what you fear or get anxious about. In the UK, sometimes it can be very hard to gain access to a counselling service or any other kind of healthcare provider through the NHS, because sometimes services are very limited, and more than likely you have to go private to see a counsellor or other professionals. But not everyone has the financial means to do this, and that's when people feel like that they are left on their own to either work out how they're going to get better themselves, or in the worst case scenario, they allow their anxieties or stress to fester on so much that it does lead to devastating consequences, where some people might take their own life because they feel so hopeless about how they feel emotionally, and they just feel stuck and like just cannot see a healthy way forward to overcome it. And that can be it's very devastating when people get that low where they feel like they want to take their own life. It's very sad. And I feel that healthcare services, I think in the UK, and also around the world really, should be doing a lot more to safeguard its own people and to ensure that services are there for those that need it the most. Also, there is a lot of information out there on the internet and other social media platforms like YouTube and various other places where there is a lot of valuable information that you can read up about anxiety or any other mental health condition. But sometimes it can there's so much information out there that you can get too absorbed into it, and it can get confusing about what is the right path forward. Because at the end of the day, a lot of the information you find online is very generic. It's open to everyone, and it does not really take into consideration a person's individual circumstances. And if you're not in the right frame of mind, you will find it very difficult to compartmentalise the information that you've searched and trying to put that into practice. And on that basis, sometimes it does require the care and the supervision of a mental health professional to help those that are in a fragile state of mind, to work out the necessary steps that someone can take gradually to overcome their individual situations in terms of anxiety or mental health overall, and to do it in a safe way. Because sometimes if you read so much online, it just gets overwhelming, and sometimes you might end up with more questions than answers, and I think in that scenario it's not really a good idea. Believe you me, as someone who's suffered with anxiety, sometimes you can get overwhelmed with all the information and you just can't work out what's the best step moving forward. So I would be cautious about what you read and how you approach it in terms of addressing your own individual situations. So you might be wondering, how does this all relate to autism? Well, autistic people are more likely to suffer with mental health on a regular basis compared to non-autistic people. And I think a lot of people within the autism community will agree with me that it's actually one of the many cornerstones of the autistic spectrum, and we should not really be treating it as a separate diagnosis, but it's really part of an autistic person's, makeup, really. My relationship with anxiety goes back to my early teenager years, where I used to question my autism, where my original diagnosis of classic autism with moderate learning difficulties just did not really match up to who I was as an individual. Even as a child with an IQ of 82, it just did not marry up. I used to put pressure on myself quite a lot, and I still maybe even do that to some degree, even as of today. Putting pressure on myself, because why was I not like the other kids at school, when I was put into mainstream schooling, and how society overall, is unfair towards autistic people. The entire society, it's not really built to really suit autistic people or neurodiverse people in general. So it's really finding that balance between developing the skills that you need to be able to fit into the world and be able to live a full independent life, but never forget who you are as an individual and never change who you are as an individual for anyone else's benefit, only your own. I have explained a lot more about my autism backstory in previous videos that I have done on YouTube. So do look back at those. So it gives you a bit more context to what I'm talking about here. And also in my introduction newsletter of the Aspergian Journal on Substack, I have gone into deeper on this. So if you want a refresh on that, please do refer back to the previous newsletter. When I had extreme anxiety, my symptoms were very similar to what many other people would have. So like, chest and heart palpitations, boiling like a kettle 1 minute and shivering like a leaf the next. Upset stomach, adrenaline, pumping around the body at like 300 miles an hour, where it's just so frightening, like it can last for hours on end, and even when the worst of it is over, it can still linger on for days, for the days that follow. Especially if you've had a real massive panic attack or anxiety attack, and even when that's worn off, you still get the after effects of it. Really, I mean, just imagine this. The Burj Khalifa skyscraper in Dubai, right? It's the tallest building in the world. And it's 168 stories high, and it's like half a mile up in the air, and you're at the top of the spire of that building, right? And you're on the outside of it, right? And you're looking down. You imagine how frightened and that you would be, and out of, oh God, I'm going to drop, oh God, I'm going to drop and die. It's that. You imagine that the amount of adrenaline that would be going through your mind at that specific point, where it's so overwhelming, and you've got to climb down that structure, that 850 meter high structure, with no safety harness, nothing, and just pure might. And you imagine how that must fit. That's what my anxiety was like for me. It was like climbing down that structure with no safety harness, and it was like, God, and those feelings, that adrenaline, just lasting for weeks on end. Like, it's just unbelievable. It's unbearable. That's what it was like. It can be terrifying. And I was having, and when I had a real massive anxiety attack a few years ago, that's what it felt like to me, and it was like, and the weeks that followed after when I had that massive anxiety attack, those symptoms, that adrenaline and that, was just, it was like going in overdrive, and it was like that for like maybe 2 weeks, 2 or 3 weeks even. And then that's when I used to struggle with like my sleeping and being moody, low mood, just being a bit all over the place, really. Another major symptom of anxiety that I used to suffer with quite badly was intrusive thoughts. Intrusive thoughts is where a person has an unwelcomed, involuntary thought, image, or unpleasant idea that is upsetting or distressing, which can lead to an obsession, and people then start to feel that they struggle to manage or eliminate it. Intrusive thoughts can vary in their nature, and it can affect people differently. These thoughts and that can vary from being aggressive, sexual, religious, or even suicidal thoughts. I mean, there's pretty much there's any thought out there that you could have that someone could get distressed about. So it's not very restricted. It's quite open, and it does affect people differently. Just because someone might have an intrusive thought of wanting to hurt a loved one, does not make them a bad person. And that, because they suffer, if their mental health is really bad, and if they get a thought of wanting to hurt someone that they love, that the capability to be able to just to safely ignore that thought and just get on with the rest of your day goes out the window, because their anxiety will latch onto anything in that causes them fear or distress, and use that to play mind games on the person who suffers with that intrusive thought. And that is different to someone who takes pleasure in causing harm to somebody, because they don't feel guilty, or they don't feel any shame of the thoughts, and they actually act upon it. So that's totally different. Those people, they are the bad people, and they don't get mentioned at all. It's people that, when they do have distress like that, it's those that we should be focusing on. Everyone has intrusive thoughts at many times of their lives, and a majority just don't recognise them. But when you have extreme anxiety, it is harder to manage those thoughts and safely let them go. The opposite happens, where they might think of it and think, oh, there's something wrong with me. I'm disgusted from having those thoughts. I mean, an example of this might be a mother with a newborn baby, and she's at the top of a set of stairs, and she's holding her baby, and she looks down, and thoughts come into her mind that she's going to drop or throw the baby down the stairs and severely injure them. Naturally, the mother would be absolutely distressed, from having those thoughts, and she'll take measures to keep the baby safe, which then acts as a compulsion to try and get rid of the thoughts that they've just had. But then that just starts that vicious cycle of intrusive thoughts, and it really sets the tone and the foundations of creating that pattern of OCD, where you have an obsessive thought and you do an actual physical compulsion to prevent it from occurring in your mind. But if you keep doing that, it just strengthens the power of the thought even more. And then that's how OCD is then created, when someone gets distressed about something and they go out and they take every measure possible to prevent it from happening again. But you can't stop thoughts from coming into your mind. The only power that you do have is not interact with them. Don't take any notice with them. And if you actually safely ignore the thought, the less distressing you're going to be when that thought occurs in your mind. In the example that I've given you, the mother with the newborn baby, I can imagine it would be very difficult for her to really dismiss those thoughts straight away, especially if they're suffering with like postnatal depression or any other forms of mental distress. To combat, manage and overcome anxiety or any other mental health condition in the long term, it is better to tackle it head on and develop healthy coping strategies that not only is an integral part of your recovery, but can be beneficial in safeguarding your mental health and to prevent any future relapses. Where we're all sceptical to having mental health at some point in the future. Even myself, I might have maybe future periods of anxiety, but I know with experience I know how to manage it, and I know it's like you develop your own toolbox of strategies and things that you use. And I've got anxiety, I know what I need to do, and I can tackle it, and I feel a lot stronger in my capabilities to overcome it. Again, if I've done it before, I will do it again. And that's the attitude that you have to have. And believe me, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Think of your state of anxiety as an opportunity to overcome it and be a stronger person as a result of that hard work and effort that you've put into making your life more better and more fulfilling, rather than just be stuck in that vicious cycle, taking antidepressants, and it's not getting you anywhere. The most common forms of therapy that people can use to combat anxiety or stress is exposure therapy, cognitive behavioural therapy, and mindfulness. Exposure therapy is the practice of where a patient stays in an anxious, provoking or feared situation that they find distressing until the anxiety diminishes. So basically, for example, if you are scared of going on public transport, like going on buses, the only way that you're going to tackle that fear provoking situation is just by getting on it and stay on it until until the anxiety diminishes. And you do this, little steps at a time. So let's say, right, first step, I'm going to do it for 30 minutes. Second time round, I'll do it for an hour or however long, Or, the more you do it, the more you practice, the less anxious you become. I mean, a good example, like for me, I always had to check the back door of my house like half a dozen times, maybe more, checking that I've locked it, and before I'll go on my journey somewhere. And what I used to do is try and diminish the number of times that I used to check it, and before too long, and I would, I'd just lock the door, check it once, and that's it, on my way. Now I know that is a very weak example, but the philosophy is the same, regardless of what you fear and what you're anxious about the most. Like the example of the mother with the newborn baby. The best way of tackling that issue is going to the top of the stairs, holding the baby, and walk down the stairs nice and safely, and keep practicing that until it becomes a point in that where you don't think about it anymore. It doesn't impact you as much. And then that's how you overcome it. So, regardless of what you fear, there's always a way out. There's always some way that you can overcome what you fear or what you get anxious about. And there's numerous examples that you can use. And to be honest, the philosophy is the same, regardless of what it is that you fear or worry about the most. It's just being proactive in wanting to get better, and to not let it constrain you into that vicious cycle that prevents you from living a good, fulfilling life. Cognitive behavioural therapy, which is similar to exposure therapy, the emphasis of CBT is more of a talking therapy where a patient talks about their anxious thoughts and worries with a counsellor, and what the objective is to challenge and change the meaning of the thoughts and the associated behaviours that one does, and now look to try and forcefully remove the thought from their minds, but actually it's just keeping them in that trap of the vicious cycle. But also, by challenging these thoughts and their associated behaviours, it can improve, the patient's mental state and develop coping strategies and that to solving, whatever problems that they've currently got, and address them head on. Mindfulness, on the other hand, is a cognitive meditation skill that a person can develop of bringing their attention to whatever is happening in the present moment, and use breathing exercises to concentrate on visual objects to occupy the mind away from worries and disturbing thoughts. And over time, by practicing those breathing exercises and mindfulness, you're actually learning to desensitize your feelings to the thoughts and the worries and that one has. So a good example of this is that if you're sitting on your sofa and you're staring at your lounge window or kitchen window, wherever, right? Obviously, look at the shape of the window, right? And you've got 4 edges. I want you you look at one corner, do your breathing exercises, like that. So and do that whilst you're looking at the edge of the window, going from one side to the other, and then down and all the way round, whilst breathing in and out, nice and gently. And if you do that for, let's say, 5-10 minutes, it occupies your mind on what you're focusing on and actually stops you overthinking about the very thing in that you're fearing or worrying about. Mindfulness and that works very effectively alongside using like CBT or exposure therapy to get the maximum benefit to overcoming your anxious thoughts and worries. In recent years, with my anxiety, I've used mindfulness and breathing exercises to help me manage and reduce my anxiety symptoms, and it has been a huge benefit in my overall mental health state and also the recovery process. And also, I even still use mindfulness even to this day to not overthink so much, because that is one big thing with my autism, is that sometimes I'm a bit of an overthinker a little bit, and I just get so caught up with things and get overwhelmed with overthinking and uncertainty that sometimes it's more detrimental to my health than anything else. And sometimes I wished I should have been a bit more stronger of not getting so overwhelmed with things. I am a lot better at it as I've become an adult, but as a child, you don't know any different, and I think that's just part of the evolution of growing up, and maturing into an adult. What you know in your 30s is a lot more different than what you knew back in your teenage years. The recommendations that I would suggest to people is like music therapy, having a great fitness regime, and participating in whatever hobbies that you have currently, or even starting new ones. And whatever you do, please avoid taking alcohol or recreational drugs just to numb the pains of your mental health, because all that does, it just perpetuates your cognitive and physical symptoms even further, and it just erodes your efforts to overcome them. Now, I know a lot of people that I've spoken to about mental health, they always say, oh, I'll have a glass of wine every night. But even though alcohol and that is, it does help, make you feel relaxed in the moment, but all it does really is it just keeps you locked in that cycle of of that over anxious state. A bit like caffeine with coffee. It keeps you, it's there to stimulate the heart and keep you, awake and aware, especially when you're trying to concentrate on your work and many other things. Me personally, I do not drink coffee or like high levels of caffeine intake drinks, right? Because it just makes my heart clatter like hell. I don't mind, like a nice cup of tea in the morning and that for breakfast and maybe one or two throughout the day, but I just could not. I know a lot of people rely on coffee, or that I've got to rely on it to get me through the day, to make myself productive. But that's not really a healthy way to, keep yourself in that state, because it just, your body gets that overwhelmed with it and built, and caffeine can have a detrimental effect on you, on your body, and to be honest, it just perpetuates that vicious cycle of symptoms of anxiety that you're currently having. Now, I did mention music therapy, and what I mean by this is that when I was struggling with my sleeping and my mind, would not shut up, when I was really bad at anxiety, with my anxiety thing, I mean, like I would be shouting at my mind, thinking, "Will you shut up already?" And so I started listening to calming, sleep meditation kind of music that you can play on your smartphone, through YouTube or Amazon Music or other apps and that's available. As well as actually complementing that with my breathing exercise, mindfulness exercises as well. I was a bit sceptical at first and thought, God, this ain't never going to work. But actually, as time got on and I was consistent with it, my distress levels before going to bed did get a lot better, and I was starting to get a lot better with my sleeping patterns, and now, I've got a lot better that actually I can't even do without it. I still use it because it helps me, drift off, because I'm one of these people that my mind does not shut down. I have to have something to think about, have something to, think on and that lot. So having that, sleeping therapy, it does help, with, trying to close my mind down and just focus on getting relaxed, before you go to bed. I mean, obviously, a lot of people might read books, read a fictional book before going to sleep, and many other things. Using exposure therapy or CBT along with mindfulness, I was able to tackle my fears and intrusive thoughts head on, and I was steadily able, over time to overcome them and not let my anxiety, take over from my life, from living, and prospering forward, a lot stronger than ever before. And I did all that, without relying on medication, just to get me by. Because that would have just kept me in that vicious cycle of anxiety even further, and I would have maybe gotten worse as a result of it. You know, considering, you know, as an autistic person where I've suffered anxiety, you know, for nearly most of my life, you know, and struggling to get the support that I needed when I was in school or like when I started college, you know, and going backwards and forwards from different services, you know, because there was the lack of support or the lack of, you know, the lack of services available. In the UK, when I was 18, you know, a lot of services and that were cut, and that due to austerity measures. And this was like 2011. Differing from your doctors and many other things. And it's just hard, you know, when you're really that distressed and you want help. And it's just, sometimes you just got to do what you can and always remind yourself that you're always going to be a very strong individual and you will get through this. You know, there was a time that I felt that I would never overcome my anxiety to a point where it could be manageable, but I never gave up. You know, I knew that I can overcome this, and I did. And I'm very glad that I had that resolve and to be able to overcome that. Obviously, everything that I have mentioned in this video up to now, you know, does depend on each individual person and their circumstances. And depending on the severity of their anxious mental state, you know, I would suggest that, you know, getting in touch with your doctors or other healthcare professionals if you need the support, and also if your individual case needs medical intervention. For those who feel that they can overcome their anxiety and stress, you know, with applying cognitive behavioural therapy, mindfulness, you know, exposure therapy, and there is a lot of information out there about these methods and how you can apply them, that actually you can do this straight away without needing that much input from your doctor or like a counsellor. But obviously, if you do need that extra support, you know, please do seek that out, even though sometimes it can be harder to find the necessary services that you need. For those who feel that they can overcome their anxiety and stress with applying cognitive behavioural therapy, exposure therapy, or mindfulness to their individual situations, please do give these treatments a try, as you will realise that you have got nothing to lose and a lot to gain. Mindfulness is something that you can do straight away without needing any supervision from your doctor or counsellor. Regardless of which direction that you take in terms of which treatments that you use or implement, and that to overcome your own individual circumstances, they all do require, you know, true dedication, patience, consistency, and trial and error, really, in terms of finding out what works for you. You know, what might work for me might not necessarily work for you, and vice versa. You know, and you just got to keep trying, you know, and always be open-minded, and that when other people provide any other suggestions and that might help. You know, there might be certain things and that someone might tell me that I've never considered before. Maybe try it and think, oh no, if I'd have known this years ago, it could have helped me a lot with stabilising my anxiety symptoms. And this really just shows, and as proof, that mental health recovery is a journey for everyone, and it's just as unique as the individual that is undertaking it. To conclude, I just want to say, with really quite a bit of a motivation piece, really, is that whatever your current situation is, wherever your mental state of mind is currently at, it does not have to stay like that forever. Things can change. And, and if you have the determination, the patience, the open mindset to try new things and really want to get to grips with what is holding you back in life or what you fear the most, by giving it your all and being proactive in combating it, your anxiety or stress or or whatever your situation is, even if it's just to manage your symptoms better, or so it doesn't hinder you from living the life that you want, then by all means, do that. And if you do it, you'll be surprised on where you can be within a matter of a few weeks. When I was suffering with anxiety really bad, and I was on antidepressants at one point, and I decided to come off them because I just did not want to be stuck in that cycle anymore. And when I did, and I really worked hard I saw a huge difference in how I felt, in terms of my symptoms. And it's amazing what a few weeks can do if you put your heart and soul into something, and it can change, or it can improve your situation for the better. And always remember, nothing is forever. You do have the ability to change your own circumstances if you are willing to put the work in to address whatever issues you have. And always remember, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And I think you'll find that just by overcoming your mental health, you'll actually become a stronger, more resilient, and more determined person as a result of it. As they say, challenges is what makes the person better and successful in life. You don't get anywhere in life and living in comfort, or just be stuck in that conformity, when really it's challenging what your mind is telling you, because your mind can play tricks on you, and sometimes you just got to tell it to shut up, and don't let it stop you from moving forward. I hope you have enjoyed this quite well detailed video about anxiety and mental health and how it relates to autism. And please, if you do have any suggestions that you can share with others and even myself about how you can improve on mental health, please leave them in the comments sections of this video. And please also consider subscribing to the Aspergian Journal on Substack, and where there is a more detailed article that actually complements this video quite well. Please consider subscribing to the Aspergian Journal on YouTube and Substack, as well as following it on its social media pages on Facebook, Instagram, Threads and LinkedIn. The Aspergian Journal now has its own website, which is www.aspergianjournal.com, and you'll find all the links and any updates and that the Aspergian Journal has, and so you can be kept in the loop for when new content is released or published. And as always, thank you.